Hey, this is Nick, CEO of IdeaScale, excited to bring another episode of Fireside Chats with Chief Innovation Officers. Today, I'm excited to chat with Brittany Cole, Chief Innovation Officer at Blanchard, one of the leading leadership training and consulting firms in the world. Before being promoted to Chief Innovation Officer, Brittany led Blanchard's Innovation Lab, which is a leading experimental research center on how to improve leadership. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brittany.
Thanks, Nick. Excited to be here.
Perfect. So just quickly, can you tell us what Blanchard does? I tried to give it a little bit in the intro, but I would love to hear it from your own in your own words.
Yeah, I would say simply Blanchard helps people have better days at work. And they do that because we give people frameworks. Oftentimes that comes through as training or leadership development workshops or coaching or digital experience, but it helps people have better conversations because they have mental models they can go use to help manage performance or build trust or manage their team or even just help each other communicate in a way when things get spicy. There's simple ways that you can say, do I need to give more candor or curiosity? So it's frameworks that people can then just go use in work, finding it in their personal lives or in their, in their parenting lives. It changes people's way of how they actually think about how they have conversations.
Got it. And then the follow-up question is, what does innovation mean at Blanchard, right? So if you're at a toy company, innovation at Mattel means they've come out with a new toy or a new color of truck. Innovation at NASA means they've reached another planet or discovered a new star. What does innovation mean in an area that's a little bit more subtle, like human leadership?
Yeah, it's a good question. And interestingly, so one of the at work, I get to do different elements of my job. And one of the things we did last year was we actually authored a program on innovation called Fearless Innovation. And part of the reason is because, just like you said, innovation is such a subjective concept. If it's innovative to one person, it's not innovative to the next because they've seen it in a different context, or it's that show me the rock game. And so I'll probably answer the question in two ways. Is one, we actually defined innovation to be an objective measure. So at Blanchard, or in our program, we say innovation is the discipline of applying ideas to solve problems in new ways to create value. So okay. I'll say that again. Innovation is the discipline of applying ideas. So one, is it disciplined? Of applying ideas. So is it applied that solve problems in new ways to create value? So it's sort of threefold. Is it disciplined? So it's not random. It's not like, oh, yay, here's an idea, great, we won. Is it applied? So it's much more than that hackathon or brainstorming session where we get in a room and we feel so great, but then we all go back to our daily lives and nothing happens. And then does it actually create value? Because I think there's so many things that are new and exciting. And I'll now transition to the leadership development space, where we get so excited about words and we say things like, well, this is a pilot, but really it's just the program we built that we're going to launch for the next 2 or 3 years. So we're using language that implies new because it's the first time we've done it, but we're not really measuring whether it creates any sort of value to the participant. So in my space, we actually use this definition in our work to say, like, there's leadership development and is such a oftentimes personal experience for an individual, and in companies it's sometimes really hard to measure because we're just measuring how many people went through this, and we're measuring participation as a measure of success, as opposed to asking ourselves, does it improve retention? Does it improve engagement, which means improves employee sentiment, which means improving performance and improving morale, and ultimately improving how a company performs, because you're tying how people feel about their work and then taking those behaviors, which are often leading indicators, to then lagging benefits. And so you might hear in like the leadership development space, it's not impactful because people go to this one-time training, which they love because they have something they can go take, but then life happens and it never creates true stickiness. And so the question you ask, it's so important because it's really that core objective definition. And then we can say, okay, how is this going to create measurable, tangible value. Because if it doesn't, then you have to ask the question, is it really worth pursuing in the first place?
So let me interject for a moment. So as someone who runs a company and as somebody who was a mathematician once upon a time, I love the idea of quantifying things, measuring things. My team will tell you, talk their ears off about metrics, ROI, things like that. However, part of your definition kind of like rubs against me the wrong way because I'm a theoretical mathematician. So I don't necessarily like the idea of all things needing to have value, right? Like part of what theoreticians do is create problems that will have no value probably for thousands of years.
I totally agree. And funny, so I'm in the leadership space, right? Soft skills, and I'm an engineer by trade. So there must be something with people with technical backgrounds who find themselves in professional services of sorts. And there's something that there's some brain wiring there. But I agree. But I would say it could be innovative, like it can be the adjective. But I would say if there was an idea, which is awesome, that you applied that didn't create value, that's an experiment. Awesome. Like, call it what it is. Say this was a great experiment. We tried something, we put it out there. Let's give ourselves some grace and say, okay, well, it didn't work out the way we planned. What's the next idea that can actually be an applied innovation? So I agree with you. I think it shouldn't thwart us from taking risks, but we also should say, okay, that didn't work. Awesome. We experimented. We put ourselves out there, and let's go find something that we can now launch and scale based on the learning that we had from that failed experiment, which is fine. Like, great, let's have more failure.
No, agreed. I love experiments. So I just want to jump to the next question and ask what this means practically. So there's this thing called the Blanchard Innovation Lab. Once upon a time, I went to business school, and I've heard of like MIT's Innovation Lab and McDonald's Innovation Lab, and I've read all these papers people put out on innovation. What does Blanchard's Innovation Lab do? Are you publishing a magazine or research articles? Are you running experiments, training seminars? Like, what does this innovation lab do for your organization?
Yeah, for us, it really goes down to a couple key pieces of who we're solving for. So traditionally, leadership development focuses on managers, people who are managing people. They lead teams, they lead individuals, and most of leadership development in general targets that audience. How can we make you a better leader so your people are engaged and your people perform, they can adapt to change, et cetera, et cetera. And so at Blanchard, where we always start is what audience typically is underserved in leadership development. So it has some of that design thinking, sort of like, let's empathize, like, who are we solving for? And so for us, that's always our first question. And then that helps us determine where might our solutions go. So it's not always necessarily the end user. So it can be. So for instance, one of our audiences that are in the innovation lab right now are next generation leaders. Gen Z, probably less millennial. Like I'm on the edge of millennial. I can kind of claim it based on my birth year, but it depends on what article you read. But really, these individuals who are becoming the leaders in the workforce, and how they, like, the research we're doing. So yes, there's research that's involved in the work. Is we're finding that these individuals think about work in a different way. They have different value proposition. They're willing to leave a company because they're not aligned with the company's core values or their corporate social responsibility. So their passion for work is different, and their expectations of work is different. And so with that said, if we know this is true about this age demographic, one is, what does that mean for how work changes? What does it mean for the skills that current leaders, current executives need to have to attract these individuals and maintain them and keep them and motivate them? Because what motivated that senior leader might be which could be money or title or just hard work, might be different than someone who demands work-life balance, who lives to work versus work to live. So for us, it's, let's identify an audience, and then what are the solutions that might attract that audience to engage. So for us, we actually have a mobile app that we built called Leadify. So that's sort of one work stream. Another work stream for us, which we probably hear, is AI. How is AI changing the shape of how we do work? How do people lead? How do managers interact with their employees? So for us, it's those new modalities. So whether it's like AI driven coaching or role plays or more immersive cohort experiences, how do we do that? And how do we do that with our clients and partners who are now adopting enterprise grade AI? So how does it mean when SL2, which is our flagship framework, we have some of the largest companies in the world who use that as their way that they manage performance with their employees. And so then the question is what if they want to bring that into their AI system within their organization, which on one end answers the biggest challenge we have in leadership development is how do you make something sticky and in the water system so it becomes a language of leadership? But then we're like, wait, we're a commercial organization and that's our intellectual property. How do we keep that safe and protected within that AI system? So that's actually, we were early adopters of OpenAI's ChatGPT. So we have an enterprise license. And so we became mega users. So we can actually, one, answer those questions, and then two, determine what does it do with our content? Because we have it playing in our content and inside our instance. So it's helping us say, here's an ethical way that you can use this content as a means to safely embed it in your organization.
From a technical point of view, if you're using any of those AIs, they are probably stealing or training on your proprietary data. The easiest way is go download a llama or something on your and run it on your computer in a basement that's not connected to the internet.
That's right. Yeah.
I did that just for fun. In practice, we use commercial AI tools ourselves in our work.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the metrics thing. One of the things you had talked about was that innovation has to create value. And again, I run an innovation company. We're always pushing people to measure things. Given that you work in a little bit more of a qualitative field, how do you measure the value, or how do you encourage your clients to measure the value of the services and products that you provide in leadership or development training?
Yeah, great question. I mean, from the base, right? It's the easiest thing to measure is participant feedback and engagement. So of course, while it's the lowest, things like completion rates, engagement levels, like NPS score, self-reported growth. An interesting measure that I really love with self-reported growth is sort of a post with a pre-reflective. So oftentimes you might have like pre-post, but say you're working with leaders, especially sales leaders who are pretty overconfident. Other individuals in this space tend to be medical professionals, doctors, legal professionals, attorneys, where they might
anyone who thinks they can play God with some aspect of
that's exactly right. And I think they have a pretty good golf score as well as play God. So this group of people who are like, I'm amazing. I'm a great coach. And so they're going to rate their pre-score pretty high, like say on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 or whatever. And we can have a whole probably side discussion on should it be a 4 scale, a 5 scale, or a 6 scale. But that'll be another conversation for another day. But then you ask the post, maybe they're better. So it went from like a 4 to a 5 or a 5 to a 6, but it's kind of a marginal change because they already think they were super awesome in the first place. And so what we actually like to do is not do the pre-survey, but do the post-survey with a pre-reflective. Just say, what are you now? And they're like, well, I'm awesome. I'm a 6. What do you think you were before?
Oh, I like that.
And they actually give a far more honest opinion, and it's statistically significant. So they're going to say, well, yeah, I'm awesome. But I was probably a 3 or a 4 versus the pre, they're going to baseline themselves at a 5 because they're coming in somewhat higher self-actualized, and they probably already are. So that's one of my favorite self-reported metrics that you can get fairly easy as opposed to doing higher level ROI studies. Other ones are 360 feedback that we do from, the manager with their employees. And a question we love to ask employees, has your manager changed as a result? And how has your manager changed? What are they doing differently? And that can be not a formal 360 or a formal 180 assessment, which tend to be more costly, but super helpful. In fact, interestingly, I just finished a debrief of the emotional capital report, which is by a company called Roche Martin, and it assesses against a set of different competencies on your emotional intelligence. And so there's the self-report, and then there's the 360. So you can see, oh, maybe I'm maybe I'm higher, maybe I need to improve my empathy because I rank myself high and my team's like, maybe you need to be better and maybe more empathetic with us. So it's a great self-awareness tool because it helps you, one, say, I do need to do something better. So that's one. And if organizations and our clients engage with us, when we think about the most effective outcomes in terms of leadership development, it's business impact. So things like higher employee engagement, reducing turnover, increased team performance, stronger leadership pipelines. So like succession planning, that's huge. ROI studies are helpful. We tend to find that it's going to be correlation versus causal to say, okay, like one I think about we did with auto manufacturer, and they were able to show over the course of an engagement implementing SL2 that they were able to show that they were able to improve like average handling time. And so, that's done in somewhat of a vacuum where there are other things that maybe impacted average handling time and first call resolution, I'm sure, but you can still own it. And honestly, in our space, that's as good as we're going to get from an ROI perspective because it is softer. But if we find with leadership development that I see the best organizations, and I think of a couple in my head, they actually have a common language of leadership. So as I mentioned, like our common language of innovation, if they can talk about performance the same way, so they know what good looks like, you're going to find those cultures tend to be higher performing because they're saying the same thing the same way.
I want to jump back to one thing you said as something that's something I just learned on this in this conversation. The notion of this pre and post survey and asking people to reflect after the fact. I always think of all these bias data where everyone gives themselves 4 or 5 stars and you just use some statistics to normalize it. That's my technique, but I'm now going to. I think I just learned a new technique that I'm going to leverage going forward. It's a cool one. I hadn't heard of it before, and I love new ways to like mutate bias data. So last question I have is kind of a more general one. So you have this title, Chief Innovation Officer. There's Chief Innovation Officers in a lot of different organizations, including public sector U.S. Post Office, private sector General Motors. What are the key qualities that a Chief Innovation Officer needs, and how would they differ from, let's say, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Financial Officer? And do you think those qualities differ across industries or sectors, whether that be public sector, auto manufacturer, or is a CIO a reasonably similar personality and transferable skill set that works well in those different contexts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the major balance of a chief innovation officer is they can disrupt a business. So a lot of times I'll talk about like I Humpty Dumpty teams. So I come in, I take it apart, we build it back together, and we put it back into the business.
I would like to point out all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Yeah, and because they didn't have a chief innovation officer on their team. But I think it's also, to your point, it's pragmatism. It's how, it's not just, hey, I have great ideas. I know amazing visionary leaders within my organization. I've met them, and they really struggle taking their big idea and actually making it happen, or happen in such a way that's not going to sink the ship. That's going to be able to be executed within the business. And so it's balancing that those assumed constraints that we might have about change with the actual real constraints that we might have around budget or timeline or resources. So I do think the most successful chief innovation officers are, yes, obsessed with what's next. They think about the future. They do an excellent job at triangulating from different industries, and they're solving real problems for real customers. So there's a bit of a macro micro that I think is more than just, I'm a great visionary.
So let me ask the follow-up question then. So you've described kind of the skill set. Which types of organizations need a chief innovation officer or an innovation department? Is it all organizations? Is it organizations of certain size or certain industry or certain position in their industry life cycle? Like, who
Yeah.
needs an innovation officer or innovation department?
I would argue every organization needs one. What they might focus on is different. I would say what we learned in our research as we built the Fearless Innovation Program, there was a big bend on innovation was highly product focused, solution focused, customer facing focused, which makes sense, right? We're using design thinking, and here's our new product, or here's how we package, or here's how we price, or whatever, here's how we go to market. So it's here's how we design something. So I think that seems natural. Everything in the consumer product goods or manufacturing or automotive, of course. However, I think it really undermines that most innovations happen in the smallest and iterative ways. It's how we talk to our customers. It's how we manage a process more efficiently. And that's ubiquitous to every organization. And so what I love about the Innovation Lab at Blanchard is, we're focusing on, say, Gen Z and millennials, but we're actually focusing as well on our facilitators, those who deliver our solutions, which oftentimes don't work for us. They might work for a partner of ours, or they work for a client organization and they're training SL2 or coaching essentials. How do we enable them to be the best at their craft? How do we help them? Because those trainers are often our raving fans, and we've been around for 40 years for a reason. It's because someone took SL2, they loved it so much, they started to deliver and train it, and then they became the head chief learning officer of the largest organization in the world. And they're like, that's a good idea. We should bring that into our company. And so how do we nurture them along the course of their own career? So I say that not flippantly, like every organization should have that formal title, but they should have a means in which they can embed innovation inside their daily work at the team level, not just at the top-down level.
Perfect. So that was my last question, Brittany. Is there anything else you want to talk about, either in the context of Blanchard or your own role as Chief Innovation Officer, as we conclude?
Yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I love that we talked as much about measurement as we did, and value creation, and how it can be so simple. I think my biggest piece in innovation is it doesn't have to be driven from me. It's not like, hey, this is how we're going to innovate at our company, but like, it's so important that managers can create the environment for their employees where they feel safe to bring up ideas, to take risks in a way that makes sense in their business, and put those out there for others to see. So I think that's like, if we can create teams that have that foundation of grace and curiosity and proactivity, we're going to see more things get created and more efficiencies built into the system that are only going to benefit people's lives and organizations.
Perfect. No, thank you again, Brittany Cole, Chief Innovation Officer at the Blanchard Companies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Nick.